Since fear appeals are such an essential part of this chapter, I thought I'd devote an entire video just to this topic. So, in general, we're talking about our emotion appeals. And when we're trying to convince a group of people to do something, one of the things we can do is make logical arguments, or we can try to use their emotions to sway them to do something they might not normally have done. So, that's essentially what an emotional appeal is. It's an attempt to influence or persuade people, specifically by presenting some emotional stimuli to them. So we might show them an image or a video or a series of text that would make them feel a particular emotion. Now, typically we have an emotion in mind, and the reason why we make them do that is because we can invoke some coping behavior within them. So in other words, I have a behavior I would like you to do. I make you feel something specific, so that the solution to that particular emotion is you to do the thing that I want. So in other words, enacting the emotions associated coping behaviors so that your behaviors become congruent or in line with the particular appeals position that I'm using. So I make you feel guilty for not doing something, so then you go do that thing to stop feeling guilty, for instance. Now, any emotion will work as long as the behavior and the emotion are consonant. So in other words, they are aligned. They are not contradictory, that they get along together, in other words. So I can't make you be scared and then have you want to go cry in a corner, right? That's not a good solution to that particular emotion. Then when we talk about fear appeals, most of the work in this area has been done with fear appeals. So according to Dillard's review, fear appeals are messages that attempt to achieve opinion change by establishing the negative consequences of failing to agree with the advocated position. In other words, if you don't do what I say, you're going to feel bad. And the way in which you're going to feel bad is you're going to experience fear. You're going to be scared of the consequence of not doing what I want. So it's the kind of grown-up version of saying, do this or else. And now they can be useful because we can attempt to influence people of some current harm they are experiencing or some impending doom that they might not necessarily be aware of. So we can tell them something that is a prescribed behavior that is taken, or we can talk about a prescribed or recommended behavior that is not taken. So if you do this, this bad thing will happen to you. If you don't do this, this bad thing will happen to you. Those are both options that we can use when we're attempting to influence our target audience. But obviously, fear appeals are the primary area in which this research has been done, but emotion appeals in general are essentially the same thing. I am attempting to influence your behavior by showing you that there are negative consequences to not doing so. Now, it's typically negative. Of course, there are attempts to use happiness appeals. So you will feel happy if you do this thing that I am asking you to do, or you will not feel happy if you don't do this particular consequence. I will say that negatively valenced emotions, fear, anger, guilt, shame, these tend to work better than the positive emotion ones. Because the negative emotions are a little bit more motivating. We want to make the negative emotion go away more than we want to seek out the positive things. So we are kind of hardwired to avoid feeling sad and not necessarily towards being happy. But fear itself is a negatively valenced emotion. It is accompanied by a certain level of arousal. So in other words, I might have a physiological or psychological degree of arousal. I will become excited, right? Think about your last time, someone jumped out and surprised you, right? Your heart rate goes up, you're breathing a little bit faster, right? Your pupils dilate, right? There is a physiological component to the experience of fear. It is generated by some perceived threat. That could be real, it could be imagined, it could be something actually attempting to attack you, or you just believe that there's something out there. Now, the mere existence of a threat is not enough to make you feel that fear. What you need is to recognize that it is personally significant. So, in other words, this thing that is out there, the consequence of it matters to me in some great way, and that it is personally relevant. So, it will actually affect me. So, the personal relevance and personal significance a lot of times can get wrapped up in one. However, they are actually distinct, because I can recognize something as having a significant consequence for me, but it's not actually going to impact me. So a good example of this is texting and driving. I can see that, yeah, like getting in an accident while texting and driving would like really mess me up. That would be bad, but it's not going to happen to me. It's not personally relevant. I'm better than the other people. Now, we can see fear expressed in a couple of ways. One is that physiological arousal I talked about a moment ago. Things like heart rate, respiration rate, pupil dilation. We can have language behavior, right? Ah, oh no, right? Those are the responses. And of course, action, run away, right? That we can do all of those three things. Now, knowing those are the consequences of making someone feel fear, we have to be able to provide a solution to prevent someone from not doing what we want, right? So, sorry, I'm not sure why this one goes in this weird order, but there it is. So fear appeals often contain vivid language or gory images. So I'm going to show you something really grotesque. Now, I'm not including those here because I don't like to look at them either, but you can find plenty of these instances, such as the pictures or the videos that were popular a few years ago of smokers, right, who had the tracheotomy, right, and holding the thing up to be able to speak, and then like peeling off their hair and like leaving behind skin, right? I mean, we can get really grotesque and gory with these images to make you feel threatened. They sometimes can be kind of subtle, right? And it may seem like the thing that we're talking about was kind of trivial, but that makes it all the more terrifying, right? This thing that was kind of everyday didn't seem to really matter, and then all of a sudden, wow, it's really going to matter to us. We can always combine this with other kinds of emotions. It's preferable that you keep your messaging kind of clean and just focus on one thing. But if we focus on something that people feel pretty confident or assured about, and then all of a sudden we shake that confidence, that is going to generate a great deal of fear, right? So something that we never had to think about all of a sudden is no longer safe. That makes us feel a lot more scared. So we can, focus on things like your sense of vanity, right? I think I am all good, right? I'm things, I appear positive and attractive to other people, and this thing's going to derail that. So emotion appeals focus on things that are obviously risky, or on something that's kind of an innocuous behavior. So, for instance, there was a series of fear appeals in the 80s about walking on escalators. Make sure your shoelaces are tied, because like the one time a kid's shoelace got caught and it like broke his ankle now. And so everyone, the story, if you ever go on an escalator, it's make sure that your cloth isn't caught or it's going to rip your leg off, right? And so it became much more dramatic. So when we actually do engage in fear appeals, we can focus on you, or we can focus on how your behavior is going to impact those around you. So there was a number of anti-smoking ads not that long ago that focused on the children of someone who smokes. Well, you're not going to change your behavior for the sake of you, but your behavior is affecting someone else, and that might motivate you to do something. So what we essentially want to do is show you that you're showing an appalling lack of grace. You just don't seem to care about anyone else, and now that has consequences. So how do we make this happen? Well, there are a couple of key components to a fear appeal. One is the threat, and that is the external stimulus, whatever that thing is, whether they know it or not. They may not be aware this thing exists. And when we have a threat, right, whatever the impending doom, right, this behavior, whatever it is that is going to result in some consequence, we typically engage in two kinds of perceptions or assessments of the threat to know whether or not it is motivating enough to act. And that is our perceived severity and our perceived susceptibility. So perceived severity is my belief about the seriousness of the threat, and perceived susceptibility is my belief about the likelihood that I could actually experience the threat. So those two things both need to be high enough to be motivating. I could recognize, yeah, this is definitely going to impact me, but it's not severe enough to make me want to do something. Or this is really severe and I'm not susceptible. I'm not going to do anything about it. Or they could both be low. I don't think this matters very much and I'm not sure it's going to affect me either. So of course I'm not going to do something. But when a consequence is severe and it's going to impact me, that makes me want to act. Now, the other piece that we often see associated with emotional appeals and fear appeals specifically is this idea of efficacy. And this is the extent to which I believe something will work. So in other words, the effectiveness of a recommended response. Now, there are two types of efficacy perceptions that we engage in when we present someone with a fear appeal. One of those is the perceived response efficacy, the extent to which I believe the response will actually work. So, for instance, if the solution to concern about AIDS is that condoms prevent AIDS, right? That I should tell you the extent to which it is successful, and that should make me believe that the solution will work, therefore I'm likely to do the solution. And the other part of it is self-efficacy. Can I engage in the behavior? Do I feel like I am capable? So to what extent do I believe in my ability to perform the recommended response? So in other words, I might say, do I believe that I can use condoms to prevent HIV contraction? So the recommended behavior works, and I'm able to engage in that recommended behavior, right? This is where anti-smoking ads work, right? Stop smoking, right? Okay, that makes me, right? That's the response efficacy. Yeah, that would stop me from smoking, right? I just stopped doing it. Can I do that? Well, no, right? There's, it's an addiction, right? It's a physical limitation that I might experience. So a lot of times anti-smoking ads don't deal with that self-efficacy. Like, how can I actually do it? How can I be capable? So I'm just going to show you the extended parallel process model and kind of see how all these things work out and talk about the outcomes associated with them. So on the left-hand side, you have the external stimuli. So in other words, the message. And a message in which I am attempting to influence you should have all of those pieces. I should include something that identifies self-efficacy and response efficacy. Here's the solution, here's how it works, and you are capable of doing it. I should say that you are susceptible, and I should say this is a severe problem. I shouldn't say all of those things in my recommendation. Once you're exposed to the message, you then get to that message processing piece here, in which I evaluate perceived efficacy and perceived threat. So if I don't identify a threat, I'm not doing anything. But if I do identify threat, that makes me experience some fear. Right, and then I can go into one of two routes. I can go into protection motivation or defensive motivation. So let's stay on the top path, protective motivation. This is what we want to have happen. So I recognize there is a threat. It's significant. It's personally impactful. There's a solution that works in front of me, and I'm capable of doing that. I'm going to protect myself. I'm going to accept the message. I'm going to go into the danger control process. So in other words, there's danger out there. I can handle it. I can make myself safe and change my behavior. If, however, one of those pieces was not satisfied, I go into defensive motivation and message rejection. If I don't believe that the threat was severe enough, well, I'm not going to do anything about it. If I don't believe that the response will work, well, I'm not going to do that. That won't fix the problem anyway. And I might recognize that I'm not capable of doing it. So again, I'm going to reject the message. So you get fear control process. I will find some reason why this is not going to be a problem. well, yeah, it's scary and terrible, but I can't do anything. So why bother thinking about it anymore? What I want is you to recognize that you can in fact do something, and then you will. So that's what the extended parallel process model does. So a good campaign message attempting to use an emotional appeal should clearly include self-efficacy, response efficacy, susceptibility, and severity.